Hi, welcome to Transmissions from the Transgender Battleground. I'm CatLady762, and as always, if you like this video, please hit the little buttons to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. This is part 2 of my videos about the WPATH Standards of Care version 8 that is up for public review right now. Part 1, I talked about how I felt some of the terms needed to be explained and how the umbrella of who is being included in these categories is getting wider and wider, which plays very nicely into what I want to talk about in this video, which is the section about epidemiology within the standards of care. Now, interestingly, apparently, epidemiology deals with the incidence or prevalence of a particular condition. But it's stated in the draft that that terminology should maybe be avoided because it pathologizes the condition, and so maybe we should talk about numbers and proportions to signify the absolute and relative size of the transgender and gender diverse population. Remember now that in version 8, we're not just talking about transgender people, we are talking about gender diverse people as well. So basically what that comes down to is how many of us are there? Well, going through the section, they talk about three various ways, or at least, I guess, two various ways to look at two different populations. The first way is looking at health system statistics. So that would basically be the people that go through seeking either psychological and or medical treatment because of their gender. The other way is through self-reported survey data, which they separate handily between surveys, the survey-based studies of adults and survey-based studies of children and adolescents. Now, they're very nice in providing a nice little block of information of the proportion of the population that fall into these categories. So let's talk about it. According to these standards of care, if you go by studies based on health system reports, the prevalence of transgender people, because they only give one type of data for this. So I'm extrapolating that by their definition, transgender refers to people that actually sought some sort of therapeutic or medical care related to transition. But those statistics are 0.02 to 0.1% of the population. Now, for those of you like me that are relatively poor at math, 0.02% is 2 out of every 10,000 people. 0.1% is 1 out of 1,000 people. Now, those sound like statistics that seem reasonable and representative of what historically we would have expected from what had been called transsexuals. Now, let's look at the survey-based study for adults. These are broken into two categories. For transgender people specifically, it's 0.3 to 0.5%. So 3 to 5 out of every 1,000 people. If you include gender diverse in the category, so you are looking at both transgender and gender diverse people, you end up with 0.5 to 4.5% of the population. That goes from that goes to 5 out of every 1,000, or 1 out of every 200, to basically 5 out of 100 people, or 1 out of every 20 people. That's for adults. According to their survey-based studies for children and adolescents, the transgender population is 1.2 to 2.7%. So somewhere slightly over 1 out of every 100 to around 3 out of every 100. Expand that to also include the category of gender diverse, and we are now looking at 2.5 to 8.4% of the population. 2 to 9% of the population. Almost 9 people out of every 100. When we're talking about people under the age of 18. That's an awful lot. That's a big jump from 1 out of every 1,000. Now, why do I think that this is so important? Because it's been clear to me for quite a while that transgender is not being seen as a medical issue anymore. It's a social issue. We have created a social category that people self-identify into. And that's clear based on survey results versus medical survey results. Now, again, why is that important? Cat lady, you're just being gatekeepery. Well, the thing is, we're trying to actually provide the best care. And yet we're making the categories so wide and so diverse that it's nearly impossible to make any type of generalizations, for one. The other is, we're actually attempting to create societal policies, behaviors, and even laws surrounding who falls into what categories. And this, to me, is partly why I get concerned when I see such a large increase of who is included in what category. Now, you can sit here all day and tell me, well, cat lady, it's just because, more people are more comfortable coming out as trans or gender diverse. Well, if that were true, then why do I spend so much time online hearing about how awful it is to be trans in society? How hated and marginalized and how hard it is to be trans in society. Now, granted, I have only been transitioned for about 6 years, but I am well aware of the situation from the 90s and the 80s and before. This is a very good time to be trans. Comparative. But if there's so much transphobia, if there's so much hatred, if it is so hard, then why this exponential increase? Because it is an exponential increase. Well, it's increasing because you're increasing who's included. You can see that just from the statistics when you look at whether or not you count just transgender versus transgender and gender diverse. Adding that gender diverse category brings it up quite a bit. Now, that's great for people that provide health care, mental health care, and transition-related services. Because that's more people that are providing them with money. Now, I'm not saying that as a conspiracy theory. I'm saying that just as a simple fact. The more people that are seeking transition, the more money that goes into transition-related services. If you can look at these numbers and not feel concerned about why there's such a difference and who is included, because also remember that in the terminology section, it was stated that part of the goal was to make sure that as many people as possible could be included in these categories. If you don't look at that and find it concerning, then I really am at a loss. So until part 3, thank you.